let me jump in early and say, this is, I mean, we're talking about My Heart is a Chainsaw, but we're also talking about a Final Girl support group. So Grady and I we'll just be asking each other questions about
Yeah.
slashers and going off about Final Girls and horror movies and anything else that comes up, you know?
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
wait, before we even do that, I wanted to ask a quick question, which is today's the 40th anniversary of Cujo. What'd you do to celebrate? Get rabies? Taunt rabid dogs?
Yeah, I went out into nature and I probably encountered a rabid squirrel or two. Anyways, maybe a bat fluttered by, and it was the bat that was, you know, it's a great grandkid of the one that bit Cujo. You know?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
it came all the way from Maine out
yeah,
to Colorado.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about it, and like, you know, King's never done anything even really slasher adjacent. You know, I think his stuff's pretty religiously almost supernatural horror.
Yeah, it
I mean,
is,
I
and a
guess
lot of
misery's not, and maybe that's the closest thing.
yeah, and his, like, he does a lot of mind power, a lot of telekinetic kids and
A lot
telekinetic
of
people, of
telekinetic kids.
course. Which I mean happens in slashers and what Friday the 13th Part 7 with Tina. Is that her name?
Sure.
Tina, I think. Yeah,
I think so.
but no, you're totally right. I think actually it's funny that you mentioned Cujo because I suspect that Cujo is as close as he's come to a slasher. You know, it's kind of like it's like these two campers in a car stumbled into the territory of Cujo, you know, and he's gonna kill
Yeah.
them the same way Jason does at Crystal Lake, you know.
Yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
also, I just want to take time for Cujo because, you know, King did that thing that I think we all do, which is you tell some story in an interview and I think you kind of blow it up for effect. And King's was that he was so drunk, he doesn't remember writing Cujo. And I think that's like the only thing people remember about that book. And it's like, I think one of his best books. And every time you bring it up, someone's like, King says he doesn't even remember writing it. And I'm like, hey, I think that's bullshit. I think that's a writer's story.
Probably, but you know, really though, whether he remembers it or not, the product is what counts, I think, you know. And you're right, it is a banger of a novel. You know, it's intense, man. You read that book. Hey, you know, I was gonna ask you, doing all this chainsaw promotion stuff. People keep asking me why slashers now, and I realized that you and I, like these two books, we both wrote them the first time in 2013. We didn't write them in 2020 or 2019, you know. So do you think there was something in the water in the 2010 2012 that was spurring you and I to jump in and get our slasher feet wet, or what?
I don't know, because I definitely think, listen, it's fitting to the time, right? Like there is nothing to me closer to a slasher movie than 2020, where we all just basically stayed indoors with our windows locked and there was like a killer out there stalking schools and hospitals. But it really is weird. I was thinking a lot about 2011 recently because my memory of 2013, 14 is a little hazy. And I remember that 2011 was super depressing financially, just economically. Like, you know, it was like unemployment was still close to 10%. They shut down the shuttle program. Gabby Giffords got shot. And so all that stuff was going on. And I don't know how happy 2013, 2014 were. I don't know. I don't know what was going on. I mean, do you have any recollection of anything going on that spurred you on this? Because for me, it was the title. I had that Final Girl thing stuck in my head, and then I came up with the title, and I was like, that leads to the book, Final Girl Support Group. But I don't know, because you came up with your title late, didn't you?
I did, but you're right. Final Girl Support Group is like the hook in the title. That's always the dream, you know, when you can do that. I came up with my title late and under orders from Joe Monte, my editor, because I thought the title I had, Lake Access Only, was the best title in the whole universe, and I'm always wrong about that, you know. But
where'd that title come
Lake
from?
Access Only. Well, it's because I'm doing that moment in the movie where somebody says, "As you know, Bob, I'm going to tell you about Chainsaw, even though you know about Chainsaw." But it came from My Heart is a Chainsaw is set in Proofrock, which is 8,000 feet up the mountain in Idaho on a lake, Indian Lake. And across the lake, there's a development going up for all the banking moguls and media tycoons, Terra Nova. And there's no roads to get around there. The only way to get there is by boat, which is to say it's lake access only. And so that's where the name came from. That's the only way to get across. That's the only way to get across there. Which I had fun. It was fun for me to do that because America was also the North American continent. The Americas, both continents were also water access only. You can only get here
Right.
in the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria. Right?
Well, unless you're an original habitant and you came across the land bridge,
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
or even earlier than that. Yeah, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Or if you came up from Atlantis. Um,
Exactly, man. Yeah, yeah.
and just to let people know, by the way, we're going to be throwing in your questions as we go. You can drop them into the Q&A panel or the chat panel. I'm keeping an eye on both. Um, someone in Dallas said that Cabin in the Woods came out in 2011. Could that have
Yeah.
influenced the Final Girl books? Yeah, I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
possible. I really like that movie a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it was an influence for me, but I
Mm-hmm.
definitely feel like that was part of that thing. Because in 2015 was the Scream TV series, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
Riley Sager's Final Girls.
Mm-hmm.
And
And 2014, was that It Follows? It seems like It Follows right around then. But yeah, Cabin in the Woods was a huge influence on me. I remember
yeah,
I got to go see it. Like Drew Goddard is from the school I teach at here in Boulder, and so they did an early screening here, and I got to go to that with him and a lot of the actors there, which was really cool. But
that's
then
awesome.
I got to be such like a super fan of Cabin that I wrote all this stuff on it. So it seems like every time there was a screening happening anywhere in Colorado, they call me up and say, "Why don't you come and do introductory remarks?" So I would go all over Colorado just introducing Cabin in the Woods in a different way, in a different way, in a different way. But I feel like Cabin in the Woods was kind of, it was not the end, but it was like the high point of a little, like we had Tucker and Dale versus Evil, Behind the Mask, Leslie Vernon.
Right.
We had these like,
And Cropsy was around then too, wasn't it?
yeah, the documentary. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so we had there was blood in the water, and I think it washed ashore with Cabin in the Woods. And for me, anyways, I feel like I probably did what was then Lake Access Only, what's now My Heart Is a Chainsaw, as a result of just living in Cabin in the Woods so completely.
Yeah. Well, so someone really quickly mentioned where'd the term final girl come from? And I mean, as far as I know, it's Carol Clover's book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
I bet it.
feel
I bet
like it
if you
was
go,
around
yeah, I
before
bet if
that,
you
but
Yeah, I bet if you go to the OED, you can find some early or instance of someone saying she's the final girl in a giallo or whatever. But as far
yeah,
as like as far as a term with like a big definition, I think Carol Clover gave it to us. Yeah.
yeah. And just one thing for people who are interested, I mean, Men, Women, and Chainsaws is a great book, but
Mhm.
I feel like Clover's definition of a final girl, like it gets hung up on some stuff that was really
Yeah.
popular in sort of women's studies, gender studies,
Mhm.
in the early 90s when she wrote the book. I mean, she
Mhm.
gets very fixated on the characters, final girls being virgins and having mannish first names and sort
Mhm.
of being coded as tomboys and male. And I don't think that's such a part of it. Like Black Christmas, Olivia Hussey is pregnant, and that's sort of
Mhm.
to me, the proto slasher. I
Mhm.
think she was really drawing a lot of that from Jamie Lee Curtis in the Halloween movies.
Mhm. Yeah, no, you're right. Jess Bradford in Black Christmas is
Yeah,
amazing, and she's such a good final girl too.
yeah,
And I agree that I think that Men, Women, and Chainsaws, as wonderful and vital as it is, it doesn't really account for like Scream and Urban Legend and Film Destination and all that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, someone's mentioned that they hold on, and this is going to be really dangerous here. But they said they had no experience or little experience with horror films, and now they want to watch all the slashers after reading My Heart Is a Chainsaw. So give me your two. I'll give two, but I want to hear your two gateway drug movies for someone who's never really seen a slasher before. What should they be watching?
Man, I would say go from 78 to 96, go from Halloween to Scream, because when you go to Scream, Halloween is on the little screen, so it's like you're
Mhm.
going deeper in. And I think, and also you hear Don't Fear the Reaper in Halloween, you hear it again in Scream. And so I think those two are kind of fun. They're not bookends on the movement or anything, but they're definitely two high points. And for me anyways, they're two good like on ramps to the genre. What about
Yeah.
you, man?
Uh, you know, I gotta say, Slumber Party Massacre is one. I
Mhm.
just saw that again for like the third time this year.
Yeah.
And that movie, man, it is so underrated, and it's a grimy slasher. Like it is
Mhm.
it's no frills.
Mhm.
Um, but it's written by oh gosh,
It's
Rita Mae Brown, the feminist
mhm.
author, and
Mhm.
directed by Amy. Oh gosh, and I'm forgetting her name.
Mhm. I don't remember
She
either.
wrote Mystic Pizza.
Yeah.
But it's a goofy 80s
Hmm.
slasher, but it's
Hmm.
surprisingly well made. The characters are
Hmm.
good. It's funnier than it has any right to be.
Yeah.
And then You Stole Scream from me, but
Mm-hmm.
I really think I don't want to throw Texas Chainsaw Massacre at anyone because I feel like that's one of those movies for me I've seen once and I'm good with that. Um, but I definitely think either Friday the 13th Part 2 or Black Christmas. I think probably
Yeah.
Friday the 13th Part 2 because I think they're both legitimately scary
Yeah.
slashers. Baghead Jason, that's my Jason.
Yeah.
Um,
No, there's also the Jason who ran. He would
yeah,
scurry after people. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
exactly.
and
And that was
yeah,
always shocking to me when he
yeah.
ran.
Oh, I know. Yeah. And what was also surprising to all of us that 1 year after the first installment, he somehow grew into this hulking presence where he was like a little kid the 1 year
Yeah.
before, so something of an issue.
Well, he carried all his body mass in his like skull in Friday one, and then somehow that comes down. It's like the fluid drained into the rest
Yeah.
of his body.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I always think how different would the slasher boom have been if at the end of Friday the 13th part two, Jason's mother's head on the table ensconced in all those candles, if she opens her eyes like they originally planned, do we ramp
that,
off into more supernatural stuff or what's going on?
but at the same time,
Yeah.
2 movies later, I think almost 2 years later, Jason's a zombie, right?
Yeah,
Is
well,
it 4 or say no 6? I guess 6 is
6.
when 6 is when we get zombie
Yeah.
Jason.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Although
yeah.
Halloween 4, is that where we first get Druid Michael?
It might be 5, but the Thorn cult and all that stuff.
Thorn,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's 5. And
Yeah. Yeah.
then Nightmare on Elm Street's 86, and that's full
Yeah.
on supernatural.
Well, is it? I think it's 84. Nightmare on Elm Street's
84,
84.
you're
But
right, you're right.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. But no, you're right. It does hit the ground running in supernatural land for sure. It's cool you're talking about Slumber Party Massacre because I can like I'm always wondering like how do you define the golden age of slashers? And for me, it of course starts with 78. I mean, I don't want to
Yeah,
exclude Black Christmas, but I think John Carpenter and Deborah Hill codified everything really nicely.
absolutely.
But I think Slumber Party Massacre 2 might be what I would consider the end of the slasher boom, which is later than a lot of people give it credit for.
What year is
A
it?
lot 87, I think. I think
Okay,
that's
yeah, I
right.
think you're right. Yeah.
And I think it in Slumber Party Massacre 2, like that escalation we've had from machetes to weed whackers to spear guns, it reaches its zenith with that guitar that has a drill on the end, which is just
Yeah.
so over the top stupid. And the killer shows up to this group of teens to kill them, not because of a revenge arc, not because he just escaped from an asylum and he just does this is what he does for his happiness. He shows up because they're a group of kids, and it's like
Yeah.
the conventions had become so controlling that you couldn't have a group of kids without a slasher showing up with a weird weapon. And to me, I mean, it's fun and all, it's ridiculous too, it's got music video portions to it and everything. But it's I think to me that's right up at the end of the slasher boom or the golden age
Yeah,
anyways.
what else was in 87? Because most people go 78 to 84. So what else are we getting if
Yeah.
we put it in 87? I mean, we're getting
Yeah.
Nightmare 3. We're getting
Mhm.
up to Nightmare 3, I think.
Yeah, Dream Warriors. I guess we get Return to Horror High. That was 86, right? I mean, that's just
Yeah.
a parody. But I think when you start getting parodies, that's when the genre is like accumulating enough fat that you have to have parody to burn off that fat. And
Yeah.
I think that's what was trying to happen there.
Yeah.
I wish we could include like popcorn and stuff, but that's like the 90s. That's getting too late. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually rewatched Phantom of the Mall.
I've never seen that one.
It was only on YouTube. It never really made it home.
Huh.
And now, of course, like Scream Factory's putting out like a Blu-ray special edition.
Oh, wow.
But it is basically Phantom of the Opera in a shopping mall. Guy gets disfigured, but he becomes Batman. Like, it's crazy. He's got a cape in some scenes. He's got all these weapons. He's got like the Christian Bale Batman voice. He does martial arts. It's a really crazy. Someone's asking about Terrifier. I don't know Terrifier.
Is that the Brazilian? Is it Argentinian? Is that the one? I mean, how can you have a conversation with somebody in
Raquel,
chat?
yeah.
Yeah.
What is clown one?
Oh, the clown. I haven't seen the clown one yet. I want to see the clown one. I love clown stuff. I love that movie Clown, if you've seen Clown. But
yeah.
I haven't seen the Clown Terrifier yet. No.
Yeah.
No.
Actually, and this is making me think. There is, I wonder if I can get it in here without revealing too much of my secret life. But hold on. up there, that poster at the top with that woman, that's this hand-painted poster for the only Pakistani slasher movie ever made called called Zibakana, Hell's Ground. But it's basically Texas Chainsaw Massacre made in Pakistan in the 2000s. And it's these kids who are going out to a concert in the country. And one of the things I didn't know, I was talking to the director, there are giant marijuana fields all over Pakistan with like 12-foot plants, but they never quite fertilize right. Like they're not like cultivated. So the weed is very skunky weed. You don't want to be smoking it. But they grow kind of wild, almost like kudzu. And they shot this. It's basically these kids run into a fundamentalist family of like inbred redneck Islamic fundamentalists living in the country. The director Omar Ali Khan is Muslim, and the Leatherface is a gender ambiguous, because aren't they all, son or daughter in a full-on head-to-toe burqa swinging a mace.
Oh, wow.
And it is straight up, I think you can find it streaming. But yeah, it was just making me think when talking about Brazilian and clown.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice.
But anyway, someone was just asking, sorry, someone had something that I wanted to make sure. Oh, someone asked what this is behind me. I'm doing the screenplay of Horror Store. That's my Horror Store map. Do you do maps?
You know, for My Heart is a Chainsaw, I finally had to do a map because Proofrock, the town, I had to know where the post office was in relation to this bench, to the bank, to the high school, because people are always running back and forth between this and that. So I had to draw a little map, and I felt like a fantasy writer. Like, what am I doing here? You know, like horror.
Did you get little
dark.
lead figurines to move around your map? But you know, I wind up doing a map for almost everything I do or something, because the thing I hate the most about writing, and I think you're right, that with like with Final Girl Support Group, it was a big thing, but I also think with Chainsaw, because that town is like the playground, man, moving people in and out of rooms and up and down halls and to new locations, it's the hardest thing. To make it seem natural, I don't know, I have a tough time with it.
And that's why, and like, what is it? Is it Angels and Demons or Da Vinci Code? One of those Dan Brown books, you know, with Robert Langdon, the symbologist. He gives them this experimental Air Force superjet that just makes them instantly go from here to there, and that's such a good solution. You know, like, please jump in the Quinjet and blast off. You know.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I really like driving. Like, I love like long distance driving, and so I'm working on a new book right now, and a friend of mine's like, please tell me it doesn't have a long driving scene, and I'm like, no, yes, it does. B, I've only done that once before. And then they pointed out, like, in almost every book I've done, like, I have these long driving scenes. It's just, but like, how else do you get people from place to place? I don't know, man.
I know. Yeah, it's like you do a section break and then you say later after the drive or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
But my default setting was car chases. All of my early books have these wild car chases, which are like Smoking the Bandit, you know, and I still would do that every chance if you let me, but I don't think Joe Monte's gonna let me do car chases.
Man,
you know?
How do you write a car? Well, you're much more into cars than I am.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So I imagine that comes easy. I would have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
I think you were fact checking my transmission stuff.
Yeah.
So someone's asking over here in the chat, they want to know about slasher books. They were talking about how in the 80s, horror novels and slashers, was there overlap? And, you know, it's funny, there are some books that are kind of slasher adjacent. I mean, there's some straight up slasher books. Joe Gibson's Sleigh Bells is, to me, one of the great slasher movies that only ever appeared as a book. It's basically kids in Minnesota get stuck in a mall on the new mall on opening day because of a blizzard, and someone dressed as Santa is killing them one by one. But the deaths are just, at one point a kid goes out for a cigarette into the blizzard because they just are jonesing for that nicotine, and the Santa lures them to the edge of, like, to right below the roof, and then pushes an 800-pound planter onto and,
oh man, you've told me about that one before, and I still haven't tracked it down. I need to read that. It sounds amazing, man.
It really is. Well, it's also very trashy. Like, it really feels like a VHS, like shot on VHS slash. It feels like Microwave Massacre or something, you know.
Yeah.
But and there's a few like Joyride and a couple of others, but really slasher books weren't.
Yeah.
I mean, are you aware of anything that really?
No, I mean, aside from like the Lois Duncan stuff, there were where I started. I think before I was even watching slasher movies, I was reading slasher novelizations, you know. And so, like my first views of Jason were watching Jason as a kid and all this backstory that never made it to the screen, you know, just like being evil, and it was really neat to me to go inside behind the mask, basically, you know. But I didn't even know there was a mask at that time. But I loved those novelizations. They were so fun. I read every one I could get my hands on.
Who was writing those? I know Dennis Etchison did Halloween novelization.
Yeah.
And he did the screenplay for Halloween they never made, where Michael grows 30 feet tall.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
It's the ending of it is like I think Michael only grows 10 to 14 feet tall, but I think there's more than one of them, and he's attacking people at a drive-in, and you're just kind of like I like Dennis Etchison a lot, but I always think of him as a quieter horror writer. I'm like, he was just like, fuck it, I'm going for broke.
Wow, that's Attack on Titan with slashers. That's kind of fun, you know?
Yeah.
But we have seen a lot of slasher novels the last like decade, I think, you know? Yeah, they've come on strong. So, I mean, you and I, we're like the ones doing it, you know, this summer, but we're hardly the first. It's been happening and happening. Yeah.
I mean, well, you know, Riley Sager, 2015, he had the Final Girls book. And I mean, to me, that was sort of like, that was a big advance, and it sold really well. You know, that was sort of the one that really owned the market for a big chunk.
It did for a while. And also back then, was Nailbiter going on by then, the comic book series?
Nailbiter, I think, is later. I think that's a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, absolutely, Nailbiter.
Yeah.
So someone's asking, actually there's a lot of questions I'm ignoring. I really apologize. This has nothing to do with the quality of your questions and more to do with reading. Oh, wait. Oh yeah, someone wants Big Girl released. So this is actually interesting. Big Girl is a book I wrote about recently. It's late 80s, I guess. But it's one of these books that, and tell me how full of shit you think I am here. So there's a thing that started happening in the 90s, and I think it happened before. I mean, it goes all the way back to Dolores Hughes's In a Lonely Place, the film noir, where books narrated from the killer's point of view, right? So you've got Dorothy Hughes in A Lonely Place. You've got Jim Thompson's The Killer Inside of Me. You know, books where your first person narrator is clearly unbalanced. And then in the late 80s, and I think Big Girl might have been Richard Wright does it with Native Son, you know, like sort of this almost stream of consciousness. He's a murderer, and he's sort of like unhinged by what's going on around him. And it's a very feverish kind of narration. But then you have much later, you have in the 80s, Big Girl is one of them, but where it's clearly a completely insane character narrating. After Big Girl, there was Zombie, but George Caloritz or Jeffrey Dahmer book. There was American Psycho with Freddie Snellis. Yeah. And so my bullshit theory is this, that POV shots in slashers are sort of like a connection between these serial killer books and the movies, in the sense that they want to put you inside the killer. There's this desire, and I don't know what it is. I think maybe just because you can, I don't know, but like this desire both with filmmakers and with writers to get you inside the killer's POV. And I don't think you do that in Chainsaw, do you?
Not in Chainsaw. I did it in The Only Good Indians, but I couldn't ring that bell. I couldn't ring that bell twice, you know, of course.
Yeah.
But you're right that the slasher on the page is all about how do you express this convention set that basically grew up at the Cineplex, you know? Because the slasher grew up being filmed, of course, and so its conventions are all built around camera angles and all that stuff, and it's a trick to try to adapt it to the page. And in my heart is a chainsaw, the closest I could come is present tense, because movies always feel present tense to me. I think because they move along without me saying move. You know, they like a comic book or a book, I turn the pages, but movies just keep going whether I look away or not, and somehow that feels more present tense. You know, but it's you're talking about moving, and when you're writing in present tense, moving between places is so much trouble, you know.
Oh my god, I actually, an early draft of Final Girl Support Group was in present tense, and I cut it out. It was you know, everyone who enters, like there was no blurring stylistically to get from place to place. Every step, it was painful for me.
It's very, very hard. And what Stephen King, if I mind, I should look this up. Early in The Stand, there's that character who is a horror writer from Maine. You know, who could that be? But he talks about it when Stephen King describes this character. He says he's one of those horror writers who writes in present tense. You know, like they're not even to be considered. You know, so I was thinking of that the whole time I was doing Chainsaw. You know,
well, and you know, and that's one of the things where I really thought that Chainsaw, because you have Jade's, like someone asked about these two, the notes on the movies, the essays on the movies between chapters, and you like you sort of almost, the novel sort of has a nervous breakdown into screenplay directions and slug lines towards the end. And it's so connected with movies that I feel like present tense works really well for it, because besides the pain in the ass factor of like just stage directions, doing present tense or final girls, it started feeling too much like a movie to me. I didn't feel like I could get interior as much like a book. So that's another reason I gave it up. But can you talk a little about the things, because you had told me before that those were much longer, Jade's essays in an early version.
You know, well, first of all, those Slasher 101 pieces, they're the extra credit papers that Jade, a 17-year-old in high school, writes for her history teacher because she's failing history. They didn't show up until very late in the process with My Heart as a Chainsaw. It took on so many different forms to become what it is now. So those essays showed up in the last like 5% of this novel's, you know, existence, but they were each probably, I mean, at least 6 pages, and some of them would go 10 or 12 pages, because I wanted to say everything about slashers here and also here and also here. And then, you know, Joe Monty and my editor BJ Robbins, they kind of they reined me back in. They said, this isn't a soapbox, it's a novel, you know, and I have to do things that express character or push the story forward. I can't just like use Jade as a sock puppet for all my slasher theories, you know. And so I had to cut down all her stuff to 2 pages each, and that was it was fun. It was a challenge. It was not easy. I'm not saying I made it easy either, but it was for the good, I think. You know, we all need people. We need people to tell us, you know, whoa, take it easy, you know.
Yeah. I'm in this moment right now with the book I'm writing where it's like I'm just wrapping up that first draft, and there's something about having no input and sort of being at sea for this long with no one to sort of be like this, hate this. I feel very lost in it. At
the same time though, if we were to give our novels to our editors or agents or friends, even chapter by chapter, I think they would die 1,000 deaths, because people say change. You can't. I don't think you can do that. That's no way to write a novel.
No, exactly, unless you're Charles Dickens. Someone, so just to get away from the highbrow talk, someone's asking about favorite kills.
You know,
what's yours? Never really think about that. So, well, mine is the one that really. So, I have a really weird relationship with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like I saw it, you know, I'd been watching Evil Dead 2. I'd been watching like fun stuff, you know. And we rented Texas Chainsaw, my friends and I, on VHS. And this is the 80s. And it was that, you know, you didn't get the box with the box art. When you rented it, you got it like a clear clamshell, basically. And this was probably a dupe. So they had just magic markered on a label on the side, Texas Chainsaw Mass. And so it looked almost like a bootleg, and we put it in, and it's a really, there's no one famous in it really. There's I didn't know who Toby Hooper was. It's a dirty looking movie. And it really grossed us out. And I came back to it later and realized it was a masterpiece, but I never need to watch it more than twice. But that first kill, where what's his name goes in the house and the sliding door slams open, sledgehammer on the head, gone. The speed of that's when I was sort of like, I don't feel comfortable with this movie right now.
That hammer just drops him like he's a bag of feed, you know. It's really nice. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful because it doesn't have that psycho thing of build suspense, you know. It just doesn't.
What's yours?
Well, you know, I have a relationship with Texas Chainsaw franchise anyways. When I was 12, I was living out in Wimberley, Texas, outside Austin. And my dad, my stepfather at the time, he hung roof tiles at night. That was his job. And on the weekends, I would go with him into town to hang ceiling tile. And one weekend I went with him, and he was hanging tile in a movie theater after hours, and I walk in, and I guess this was where Chainsaw must have been debuting, you know, Austin, Toby Hooper, and because they had a velvet rope area with all the Chainsaw furniture, like from the movie there, you
Oh,
know,
wow.
and so I got to step over the velvet ropes and play on the furniture for half the night, you know, and then I hung ceiling tile for the rest of the night. But I had never seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the time, although we knew where the bridge was from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 somehow. Later that year
Oh,
we did, and
yeah.
we would we would get in the back of a truck and drive back and forth across that bridge and just scream and scream. It was so fun, you know. but my favorite kill, and my favorite kill in a pure slasher, is probably that guy in Friday the 13th 3 who is naked and does a handstand in the hall, and Jason splits him upside down with a machete.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty, like and when I watched that the first time, I was probably, I don't know, 13, 14, and I was like, is this part of it, you know? Is this how it goes? But no, I think my favorite kill in horror is probably Dario Argento's in Opera, that peephole moment where that woman is looking through that peephole. That is one of the most beautifully orchestrated violent kills I've ever seen.
Such a great gag. Yeah. And you know, it's funny because it was just Dario Argento's birthday too. And I was talking with someone, and they were like, they were using giallos and slashers overlapping. And like at the end of the day, who cares? But also, I think it's important to talk about the distinction, because everything can't be everything. You know what I mean? And like it's so for me, like there's a huge difference between giallos and slashers, because I feel like giallos revolve so much more around a mystery. There's often a heavily sexualized component to the killer or the crimes. I don't know what for you, because like I would never call Bay of Blood a giallo. I mean, to me, that's a slasher.
Yeah, it's a slasher grandfather, anyways, for sure.
Yeah.
And well, I think the big difference is giallos have a much better color palette, you know, than slashers, of course. But
higher budgets.
Yeah, exactly. For me, the big difference is slashers tend to be either revenge driven or just like mad dog killer driven, whereas giallos are generally driven by greed, or there's just a random serial killer in town. And those are totally different. Although what the giallo gave to the slasher, I think, was winnowing down a crew of, you know, kids, teachers, whoever it is, or models. It's often models, it seems, winnowing them down to one person to have a confrontation with the killer, whoever it is, whoever its surprise is. And I think that reveal and that one person battle got pushed forward to the slasher and taken to different areas, you know. But no, I totally agree that you can't interchange those two terms, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it's also it's interesting because one of the things, and this is purely technique, but I feel like giallos are so much more concerned with the set piece around the kill. Whereas I feel like in slashers, it's setting up the kill. Like you know, it's like the set pieces I remember in slashers. I remember the kills, and I remember the chases without a kill at the end. Like you're talking about the whole thing on the bridge with Chop Top and those guys. I remember that car chase, but I don't remember that kill at all. Like whereas I feel like giallos are structured around these really slow burn set pieces that end with the kill.
Yeah, like if you look at Bay of Blood, where that couple is having sex and whoever it is sneaks in with that pike or that spear and like slowly pushes it through their back and then through the bed.
Yeah.
You know, you see that scene kind of done again in Friday the 13th Part 2, I think it is. Yeah. But when it's done in Friday the 13th Part 2, it's just so fast, and it's like it's you miss it. You don't get that delicious slowness that you get in the giallo. You know.
Yeah. So someone's asking about tension and pacing, which I actually think is a really good question, because with movies it's editing, and I think that sort of setup, payoff, slow burn thing is harder on the page. So like, because like for me it's about really technical garbage, like paragraph size, sentence length, stuff like that. I don't know, what's your bag of tricks, man? So I can
you know, no, I think you're right about that film can do it with editing, but like the way film will do it with editing is, I mean, number one, the transition type or style or tone, but like you'll be looking at the killer, then you'll look at an ashtray, then you'll look at the target or whatever. That's like how you can go roundabout, and you have those same roundabout avenues on the page, but you can't really go talk about an ashtray. That's going to feel false. So what you can usually do is just jump into the usually the target's head, and you can, like Kurt Vonnegut says, you got to have that up and down for a good story, or for a story that engages the audience anyways. And I think you can do that within a scene, a tension scene like that, but it's not about going like drone view and mouse view. It's not like close and far. It's about in and out. We see them from the side, then we go behind and look out through their eyes, that kind of stuff. That's my best suspicion to how it works anyways.
I also get a lot of mileage out of like on the body ridiculous sensation, you know what I mean? Injuries, blood flow, breathing, that kind of stuff. Like I find that's really, really helpful with that.
You did that so well in the Southern Book Club Guide to Slaying Vampires with that raccoon kill by the trash can, and that's one of my favorite kills. And you make it so tactile and so goopy, and you like focus on stuff that I wasn't expecting to focus on, and for that reason I'm surprised. And I mean, I'm surprised by the gore and by this raccoon acting not like a raccoon and all that stuff, but I'm more surprised by the details you choose to deliver to me and make me live.
Oh, thanks. Well, that one, I was very proud of the fact that I was like rewriting that, and I was like, oh right, fleas, because I noticed like a lot of times when you see a dead animal by the side of the road, like the fleas are leaving, and I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna have fleas. It's a raccoon. So someone just said, go ahead.
Oh, I didn't want to say fleas. I didn't want to spoil it for anybody. But
spoil. The book's like 2 years old. Everyone's been locked up with the pandemic. If you haven't read it by now, you're never going to. I was going to say, someone just said fighting words, which is, do you think slashers as a genre are over? There's so few after 2010 that really register like the classics. Okay, man. So for me, I just want to throw out there is a very classic arc that I think, as far as I'm concerned, who knows what's coming next, but got tied up in 2018, which is the Laurie Strode story, which is Halloween 1 and 2, Halloween H2O, and Halloween 2018, which I think is such a great trajectory for her character. Leave out every other movie. Those 4, that's the beginning, middle, end of the Laurie Strode saga. Same woman, same character, same timeline. And I don't think it's as good without the 2018 on there.
Oh, okay, nice.
What about you, post 2010 slashers?
Oh, well, I mean, of course, there's The Final Girls, there's Tragedy Girls, there's Happy Death Day, there's Freaky, there's It Follows.
Happy Death Day is another one I would throw in there as I think a modern classic.
And also talking about like remakes, which Halloween is, the 2020 Halloween wasn't a remake, of course. However, it's called Halloween. It's not called Halloween Part 12 or whatever. And I liked it where that's the current like state of the reimagining or the reimagined sequel, because you're about to have Scream, which is Scream 5, but it's just called Scream, I guess. And then Candyman just came out. It's really a sequel to the 91 92, whenever Candyman came out. It's a sequel, but it's just called Candyman. I think it's cool that that's the new thing you do. You don't like rebrand. You don't rebrand. You use the same brand. That's pretty cool.
And I would throw in, I mean, like, I think movies like, even though I hate it when it gets to the ending, Haute Tension, which I think is post 2010. And I'm trying to think, there was another European movie that I thought was, oh no, not European, The Strangers, which I don't think is really a slasher. It's more of a home invasion movie, I guess.
It is, it is, I agree. But the slashers Prey at Night, The Strangers too, I thought that was an amazing film. I love Prey at Night, man.
I mean, so I think there are some post 2010s. I don't think the genre is ever over. It's just waiting. It's just resting.
Oh, I see somebody. I can see the dialogues pop up. You're next. Your next is like The Strangers. It's also a home invasion. But home invasion is so good. But you were talking, Grady, about how it is. I mean, arguing what is and isn't a slasher is, how many angels can fit on the head of a pin, that kind of stuff. And it's basically useless. Which isn't to say I don't do it all the time. But I always like my rules for something to be a slasher are that it has to be a human killer or a very humanish killer, you know, like from that, which means Alien is not a slasher. Alien is something different. And also there can't be more than 2 killers, which is arbitrary. And I'm just making that like my Billy and Stu rule, I guess. But yeah, I need it to be like less than 2 and basically human, you know, which I know it creates problems with Cabin in the Woods. It creates problems with It Follows, but I'm not one of those exception proves the rule people. I think that's a ridiculous thing to say. But I think my definition is too limiting, but it's the only thing I've ever found that gets me through the day, you know?
Yeah. No, and I tend to agree. And I mean, I also feel like it's killing one by one. Even though you have exceptions like the burning with that great raft sequence and stuff, I really do feel like the hunt, that the stalker set pieces are really important for a slasher. And so someone's asking about non-horror novels that are inspirations. I don't know if you want to tackle that.
Yeah, well, a non-horror novel was an inspiration for My Heart is a Chainsaw, actually. Jeffrey Eugenides' The Virgin Suicide, which I guess came out in what, 90, 91? It's right around the time of American Psycho, actually. That novel's told in like the royal first person, the we, the Greek chorus. You know, you don't say I, you say we. And I read that book a lot of times, you know, and I realized that I love this delivery method, but what if there were kills every 12 pages or something, you know? And so the first draft of My Heart is a Chainsaw ported that like royal first person over to a slasher, and it didn't work. It was a broken novel, but that's where it starts for me anyways.
Yeah, for me it's True Grit. That is a book I think is really underrated, and it's a book that I really feel like is the great American novel. Like Huck Finn's cool and all for the 19th century, but for the 20th century, True Grit's all about sort of the people we needed, what happens when we don't need them anymore. Maddie's such a great narrator, and I feel like her narration and her voice is so important. Like I've never seen the movies because the movies try to literalize that voice, whereas I feel like this is what she would talk like, and because she's trying to present herself as someone who's more educated than she is, as someone who's more proper than she is. And it's so great that she's doing that, you know, trying to project this more upper class version of herself. But I really feel like
No, I totally agree. Maddie is amazing. And I agree that True Grit might be the novel of the 20th century. The only things I would put up maybe alongside it would be The Great Gatsby, of course, and maybe James Dickey's Deliverance, you know, which is
James
kind
Dickey's
of built.
I was going to say James Dickey's Deliverance is such a wild book. I mean, to me, that's such a stoner book, and in a way that I like it because it just keeps collapsing into these like almost magnified moments of just looking at nature and being in nature. You know, when he's waiting on top of the cliff, and you know, I mean, it's just these beautiful sort of like the plot collapses. It disappears. You know.
Yeah, it's like there's these reveries that are staged every once in a while. It's like you know, James Dickey being a poet decided, hey, we're going to go lyrical for a few paragraphs here. Just stick with me, you know. But Maddie, I love when Maddie says in True Grit, when she says about drinking, why would I put a thief in my mouth to steal my tongue or something like that. She has so many sayings like that, and she's just so excellent. I do love Maddie, and if I remember correctly, somebody out there correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Sally Fields might have like been in contention to play Maddie in the John Wayne one, you know, and didn't get picked. Yeah.
Who played her in the John Wayne one?
I don't remember her name. She does it really well. I don't remember her name.
No, but so I feel like, you know, it's I don't know, it's one of those things where I actually read a lot of crime fiction. I don't know if you do, but like I find that like some of these writers, like, I mean, Elmore Leonard's sort of a gimme, but like George B. Higgins, Charles Williford, guys like that, they really have this stripped down approach to dialogue that I really steal a lot from. Elmore
Leonard, everybody considers him the god of dialogue, and he does do amazingly engaging dialogue. But it's fun when you take apart Elmore Leonard conversation on the page, because it's not actually what's between the quotation marks that's where the magic happens. It's the tags and the actions around the quotation marks that's where he lives and breathes. That's where his stuff comes alive, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever read Higgins, George V. Higgins?
I don't think so, no.
He's sort of the guy who does it more than Elmore Leonard. And Elmore Leonard said several times that Higgins is sort of who he steals from. But it is some amazingly boiled down. I mean, you'll be reading a conversation and really having to find the clues, but it's straight up crime fiction. And he wrote a book called Patriot Game about IRA fundraisers in Boston in the 70s, I think, that has one of the greatest physical set pieces I've ever read. And it's just the way he's able to spring surprises on you as a reader, and really he's really worth checking out. Friends of Eddie Coyle is one of his. Anyways, someone's asking about Blood Meridian. I have never read a single Cormac McCarthy book. I don't know if that's good or bad.
I think I may have read all of them possibly, but yeah, Blood Meridian, I just reread it recently. What about it though?
They're saying would you consider it horror?
No, I think it's got like a tree with babies hanging on it, and that's definitely a horror. That's horror imagery. But no, I think it's very self-consciously even a Western, you know. Which isn't to say you can't have Western horror. I think you can have Western horror, but no, I think it's really just about how ugly the West was, and how what Cormac McCarthy's doing in Blood Meridian is basically saying, let's dispense with the myth. Here's the meat and gristle that was actually happening.
Someone's asking about your dedication to Deborah Hill at the beginning of Hard as a Chainsaw. And I actually think it's a nice one. You know, slashers, which are a genre I really love, and I believe you're a big fan too, they do get this sort of boys' locker room reputation. And I feel like, you know, there's like Slumber Party Massacre 1, 2, and Sorority House Massacre are three Corman-produced movies that were written and directed by women, and I think are really unusual and phenomenal. I think Jamie Lee Curtis later on exerted a lot of control, or at least tried to, with the Halloween franchise. And I feel like, you know, there are women in this world who make a big difference and have a big impact, but Deborah Hill's clearly one. And I think probably not everyone on here may not know who she is if you want to educate them.
Well, she's the co-writer and a producer for Halloween, of course. But the reason I dedicated Chainsaw to her was that, not to take anything at all away from John Carpenter, like his composition and his like putting Michael in the background instead of the foreground, all his tricks he does to amp up and maintain the tension in Halloween are amazing. And his score sends it over the top, of course. He's just amazing. However, if I understand correctly, a lot of the dialogue between Laurie Strode and her friends was Deborah Hill. I mean, Deborah Hill was in charge of that. She's in charge of other stuff as well, but she was in charge of that. She made them sound like 17-year-old girls. And I think in Halloween, if Laurie Strode and her friends don't sound like high school girls, then we don't engage them. We don't care as much when they die, you know? And people always forget that with slashers. It's not just about propping up carbon dummies and knocking them down. It's about getting the reader or the audience to care about the character and consider them a real person, such that we hurt when they die, you know? And I think Deborah Hill gave that. I think she seeded that into the genre early. It wasn't always followed, but you get somebody like Wes Craven and he's doing it again, you know?
Yeah. And I also think, it's also, you know, it comes in weird places. Like Friday the 13th part, you compare how loosey-goosey 1 feels to the later installments, but a lot of 1 was improvised. You know, Adrian and Betsy, a lot of them were improvised or getting their lines right before they shot and then sort of tweaking them as they went. So there is a much more loosey-goosey, naturalistic feel to it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And like, it's wonderful that that a lot of it is like in the moment like that, because otherwise you have to think somebody wrote that scene with Officer Doof, you know, and then that just hurts our soul, you know.